I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my fingers tracing the lines that had begun to etch themselves around my eyes and mouth. 54 years old. How had I gotten here so quickly? The woman looking back at me seemed like a stranger, still attractive. Yes, but faded somehow. Dimmed? I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt truly alive, truly seen. Aiden was in the living room, settled into his usual evening routine. The low murmur of the tea and the clink of ice in his whiskey glass drifted down the hallway. I knew without looking that he'd be in his favorite armchair, remote in hand, barely noticing if I walked through the room. With a sigh, I turned away from the mirror and retreated to our home office. The glow of my laptop screen illuminated the darkened room as I settled into the desk chair. I'd only meant to check my emails, maybe scroll through social media for a bit, but somehow my fingers led me down a different path. Before I knew it, I was on an online forum I'd never visited before. The conversations were intriguing, exciting, people discussing their deepest fantasies, their secret desires. I felt a flush creep up my neck as I read, my heart beating a little faster. And then I saw him, Jamal. His profile picture showed a man in his late 20s, all sculpted muscles and confident smile. He was offering company for a price. I hesitated, my cursor hovering over the message button. This was crazy. I was a married woman, for God's sake. What was I thinking? But the thought of being desired again, of feeling young and alive, it was intoxicating. Before I could talk myself out of it, I clicked the button and typed out a message. My hands were shaking as I suggested a meeting at a nearby hotel. As soon as I hit send, a mixture of exhilaration and terror washed over me. What had I just done? Part of me wanted to take it back immediately, to delete my account and pretend this moment of weakness had never happened. But a larger part, the part that had been suffocating in the quiet routine of my life, was thrilled. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. I thought about Aiden, still sitting obliviously in the next room. We'd been married for over 30 years. He was a good man, a dependable husband. But when was the last time he'd really looked at me? When was the last time I'd felt that spark, that passion? My phone buzzed, startling me out of my thoughts. A new message. Jamal had responded, agreeing to meet. We set a date for the following week. I felt dizzy as I typed out my confirmation, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to take a leap into the unknown. As I made my way back to the living room, I paused in the doorway. Aiden glanced up, giving me a distracted smile before his attention returned to the TV. He had no idea of the storm brewing inside me, of the line I was about to cross, so part of me wanted him to notice, to ask what was wrong, to pull me back from this precipice. But he didn't. And in that moment, I knew I was going to go through with it. I was going to meet Jamal, consequences be damned. I needed to feel something again, even if it destroyed everything in the process. And I told Aiden I had yoga, it came out so easy, which surprised me. These lies just seemed to slip like they were rehearsed, already embedded in my brain before I even said them aloud. And of course he didn't bat an eye. He barely looked up from his newspaper, mumbled something about having a meeting later. That distance between us, it made things simpler. It was like I'd already started disappearing from him, both physically and emotionally. I was fading right in front of his eyes, and he couldn't even see it. I think's what hurt the most, knowing that he wouldn't notice I was gone if I ever truly left. Once I got in my car, the nerves hit, my hands shook as they gripped the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard I could hear the rhythm in my ears pick. So this wasn't yoga. This was crossing a line I once swore I never would, and yet I couldn't stop myself. The excitement was coursing through me, electric, the kind of anticipation that I hadn't felt in years. It lit me up in ways I didn't think were possible anymore. At 54, I thought those parts of me had long since withered, but Jamal, no, the idea of him made me feel wanted again. Like I was still capable of stirring something in someone. The hotel wasn't far, just on the other side of town, far enough down to feel hidden. Close enough to make me realize how easy, how accessible this secret life could be. I parked in the back to avoid any wandering eyes and walked in through the side entrance like I belonged there, my pulse still hammering. trying to convince myself this wasn't a mistake. But once I reached the elevator and the door slid shut, the nerves melted a little. And I wasn't thinking about Aiden or the years we'd spent building a life together, and my mind was locked in on the thrill, the unknown, the possibility of what was moments away from happening. When he opened the door, I remember immediately noticing how tall he looked in person, how real he felt compared to the fleeting online messages. Jamal's sharp eyes locked onto mine, and without saying a word, he stepped back to let me in. So my fingers brushed against his arm as I passed, and that simple contact sent fire burning through me. Suddenly, it wasn't about thought thoughts or morality or anything outside that dimly lit hotel room. It was this pull, this force that had been slowly taking over my mind for weeks now, finally ready to explode. Once the door clicked shut, everything moved fast. Jamal wasn't shy. His hands knew where to go, how to touch, how to pull me in like he'd done this 1,000 times. His kiss wasn't gentle, but I didn't want gentle. I wanted to feel like I was alive again. And I did. My pulse echoed in every part of me. My body responded, wanting more even before I was ready to admit it to myself. Jamal's energy crashed into me like a tidal wave, relentless. All those quiet nights with Aiden, the predictability, the comfortable silence, it all slid away. Jamal made me feel like I was reckless again, like those years hadn't dulled me into this existing shell of habits and tasks. Afterward, lying there in the tangled sheets, my chest still heaving, reality started clawing its way back in. Guilt, thick and heavy, settled into my stomach like a stone. But at the same time, there was this intoxicating sense of validation of having experienced something I thought I had lost long ago. I felt breathless, disoriented. Jamal slowly pulled away, sat up like this was just another Tuesday morning for him. His calmness grounded me, soothed what should have been panic into something manageable. "You can stay if you want," he shrugged, half-dressed already, his casualness infuriating, at the same time oddly comforting. But I didn't stay. I made up some excuse about needing to get home, back to the lie I'd spun about yoga. He didn't seem to care. It was all part of the game for him, a quick exit and then on to the next one. His nonchalance made it easier for me to grab my clothes and slip out the door, back to the daylight world. Except I wasn't the same person anymore. How could I be? I'd felt alive for the first time in years and decades, and as much as the guilt gnawed at me, part of me wanted more. And more I got. Days passed, and I promised myself I wouldn't reach out again. One time was enough, I told myself. I'd had my taste, and that was all it needed to be, a one-time escape, a brief departure from reality. But the memory of that thrill stuck under my skin, the way Jamal's touch had awakened something dormant in me. And before I could stop myself, my fingers were scrolling through old messages, that familiar twinge of excitement bubbling up again. When I finally texted him, it wasn't long before we were making arrangements for another meeting. That second time only intensified the addiction. There was no hesitation, no internal debate. I was hooked, lost in the rush of it all, the secrecy, the danger. Jamal knew it too. He could see it in my eagerness, the way I was coming back so soon. After all, this was his game. The strings he pulled, the buttons he pressed. He wasn't just some young guy looking for a good time. He understood the power he had over me. How could he not? I was practically feeding into it, handing him the reins to my life, to my choices. We met again and again. It started to feel routine, but in the most exhilarating way. Each time Jamal pushed just a little harder, making me crave not just him, but the entire experience. And then one afternoon, as we lay there catching our breath, I confessed, almost without thinking, that I was enjoying it more than I anticipated. Like I couldn't get enough of this newfound version of myself. The words were barely out of my mouth when Jamal tilted his head, a knowing smile creeping across his face. "If you're looking to take it up a notch," he began, voice smooth and deliberate. "I know a couple of guys who'd be interested." His words hit like an electric shock. I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over Jamal's message. Multiple men. The idea sent a shiver down my spine. So part of me wanted to be outraged, to shut this whole thing down, but another part, a part one, was becoming increasingly familiar with, tingled with excitement. "You still there?" Jamal's message popped up. I took a deep breath. "Yes, tell me more." He explained about his friends, Malik and Dante, both in their late 20s, both eager to join our fun. My heart raced as I imagined it. 3 young, fit men all focused on me. It was terrifying and thrilling all at once. Okay, I typed, my hands shaking. Let's do it. We set a date for the following week. I told Aiden I had a late yoga class and a girls' night out after. He barely looked up from his crossword puzzle as I left. The hotel room felt different this time, bigger, more ominous. Jamal greeted me with a kiss, then introduced me to Malik and Dante. Malik was slim and serious with intense eyes that made me feel exposed. Dante was stockier with an easy smile that put me at ease. What followed was a blur of sensation. I lost track of who was who, surrendering myself to the experience. It was overwhelming, almost too much, but God, it felt good. Afterward, I lay there catching my breath. The guys chatted and laughed, seemingly unfazed. I felt a twinge of something, shame, regret, but it was quickly washed away by a wave of satisfaction. I'd done something wild, something I never thought I was capable of, and I wanted more. Over the next few weeks, our meetings became more frequent. I found myself constantly checking my phone, waiting for Jamal's next message. Each time I told Aiden I was going to yoga or meeting friends, each time he barely noticed. But these encounters weren't free. Jamal had hinted at compensation before, but now with Malik and Dante involved, the costs were adding up. So I started dipping into our joint savings account. Just small amounts at first, nothing Aiden would notice. But as our meetings increased, so did the withdrawals. I justified it to myself. I deserved this, didn't I? After years of feeling invisible in my own marriage, didn't I deserve to feel desired, to feel alive? Our encounters became almost routine, teamed up them at the hotel. We'd have our fun, and then I'd transfer the money. It was transactional, sure, but it filled a void I hadn't even realized was there. The risk only added to the thrill. Sneaking around, lying to Aiden, withdrawing money, it all made me feel like a different person. Someone exciting, someone daring. I started giving actual yoga classes to meet the guys. I'd come home flushed and energized, and Aiden would comment on how good yoga was for me. If only he knew. Sometimes in the quiet moments at home, guilt would creep in. I'd look at Aiden, engrossed in his work or his hobbies, and wonder how we drifted so far apart. I'd think about the woman I used to be, the promises we'd made to each other. In those moments, I'd consider ending it all, coming clean, trying to salvage our marriage. But then my phone would buzz with a message from Jamal, and all those thoughts would vanish. The thrill, the excitement, the feeling of being truly seen and desired, it was addictive. And I was in too deep to stop now. I stared at my phone, heart racing as I read Jamal's latest message. He wanted to meet again, this time with Malik and Dante. My fingers hovered over the screen, torn between desire and guilt. I glanced at the bedroom door, knowing Aiden was just on the other side, oblivious to my internal struggle. Taking a deep breath, I typed out a quick reply agreeing to meet them. As I hit send, a wave of exhilaration washed over me. This was wrong. I knew it, but I couldn't stop. The thrill of our encounters had become an addiction, one that I wasn't ready to give up. So I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Aiden. In the bathroom, I scrutinized my reflection. The woman staring back at me looked different, alive, excited, with a spark in her eyes that had been missing for years. But there was something else too, a hint of shame that I quickly pushed aside. Over the next few weeks, my meetings with Jamal, Malak, and Dante became more frequent. Each time I told Aiden I was going to yoga, or meeting friends, the laser rolled off my tongue with frightening ease. I hated myself for it, but the moment I was in their arms, all guilt vanished. To fund these encounters, I started withdrawing money from our joint savings account. But at first it was just small amounts, but as my addiction grew, so did the withdrawals. I told myself I'd pay it back somehow someday. One evening, as I was getting ready to leave, Aiden called out from the living room, "Em, where are you off to?" I froze, my hand on the doorknob. "Oh, just yoga," I replied, forcing a casual tone. Aiden appeared in the hallway, a slight frown on his face. "Again, you've been going a lot lately." I felt a flicker of panic. "Well, it's really helping with my stress and flexibility," I added with a forced laugh. He nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "All right, have fun." As I drove to the hotel, Aiden's questioning look haunted me. Was he starting to suspect something? So the thought sent a chill down my spine, but it wasn't enough to make me turn around. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself spiraling deeper into my secret life. The thrill of each encounter was intoxicating, but the come down was getting harder. The guilt ate at me, especially when I looked at Aiden. He'd been such a good husband, and here I was, betraying him in the worst way possible. One afternoon, I returned home to find Aiden sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his laptop. He looked up as I entered, his face unreadable. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Everything okay?" Aiden's voice was oddly flat. "I was just looking at our bank statements. There have been some large withdrawals lately. Do you know anything about that?" My heart skipped a beat. I'd been so careful, or so I thought. Yeah, I stammered. I've been helping out a friend. She's going through a tough time." Aiden's eyes narrowed slightly. "A friend? Which friend?" "You wouldn't know her," I said quickly. "She's someone I met at yoga." He nodded slowly, but I could see he wasn't convinced. "Right, well, next time, could you let me know before making such large withdrawals? It's our joint account, after all." I agreed, promising it wouldn't happen again. As soon as I could, I escaped to the bathroom, my hands shaking as I gripped the sink. This was getting out of control. I needed to stop to end things with Jamal and the others. But even as I thought it, I knew I wouldn't. I was in too deep. So the next day, I met Jamal at our usual hotel. As soon as I saw him, all thoughts of ending things flew out of my mind. His touch, his smile, the way he looked at me made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. After, as we lay in bed, Jamal ran his fingers through my hair. "You seem tense today, baby. Everything all right?" I hesitated, then decided to confide in him. "Aiden's starting to ask questions about the money. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." Jamal's hand stilled. "You haven't told him anything, have you?" "Of course not," I said quickly. "But he's not stupid. He's going to figure it out eventually." Jamal was quiet for a moment. "Maybe we should cool things off for a bit. Give you some time to throw him off the scent." The thought of not seeing Jamal sent a panic through me. "No," I said more forcefully than I intended. "No, I don't want it to stop. I'll figure something out." He smiled, that slow, sexy smile that always made my heart race. That's my girl. As I drove home that evening, I tried to come up with a plan. I needed to be more careful, more discreet. Maybe I could open a separate account, one that Aiden didn't know about. The thought made me sick, but not sick enough to stop. Days passed, and I could feel Aiden watching me more closely. His questions about where I was going and what I was doing became more frequent. I found myself flying more and more, each untruth building on the last until I could barely keep track of them all. So one afternoon, I was getting ready to leave when Aiden appeared in the doorway of our bedroom. "Going to you again?" "Yeah," I said, not meeting his eyes as I rummaged through my purse. "I called the yoga studio the other day," Aiden said casually. "They said they don't have any classes at the times you're usually gone." I froze, my heart pounding. I must have given you the wrong studio name," I stammered. Aiden's voice was cold when he spoke again. "Emily, what's going on? Where have you really been going?" I turned to face him, panic rising in my throat. "Aiden, But before I could finish, he held up a hand. "You know what? Don't. I don't want to hear any more lies." With that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, the weight of my deceptions crushing down on me. I knew then that my carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. But even as I felt the fear and guilt threatening to overwhelm me, a part of me was already thinking about when I could next see Jamal. The addiction had its claws in me deep, and I wasn't sure I wanted to break free. The next few days were tense. Aiden barely spoke to me, and when he did, his words were clipped and cold. I could feel him watching me, waiting for me to slip up, but still I couldn't stop. I continued to see Jamal and the others, the thrill of our encounters now tinged with a desperate edge. One evening, I returned home to find Aiden sitting in the living room, a stack of papers in front of him. As soon as I walked in, I knew something was terribly wrong. "I followed you today," Aiden said, his voice cold and flat. "Turns out yoga class isn't really yoga, is it?" My world stopped. I felt the blood drain from my face as I stared at him, unable to form words. I can explain. I finally managed to stammer out. He cut me off with a harsh laugh. Explain, how are you going to explain this, Emily? He held up the papers and I recognized them as bank statements. How are you going to explain thousands of dollars withdrawn from our joint savings? How are you going to explain going to a hotel instead of yoga? I felt my legs give out and I sank onto the couch. I'm sorry, I whispered, tears starting to fall. I'm so sorry. But Aiden wasn't done. His voice rose as he continued. How long has this been going on? How could you lie to me so easily? 30 years of marriage, and this is how you repay me. The floodgates opened and everything came pouring out. Through my sobs, I told him everything, how it started with Jamal, how I paid them, how the excitement had consumed me. Aiden listened in stunned silence, his face a mask of pain and betrayal. When I finished, the silence that fell between us was deafening. Aiden stood up, his movements stiff and mechanical. I can't even look at you right now, he said, his voice breaking. How could you do this to us? I reached out to him, desperate to fix what I had broken. Aiden, please, I love you, so we can work through this. But he stepped back, shaking his head. No, Emily, we can't. This is too much. I don't even know who you are anymore. As I watched him walk out of the room, I realized the full weight of what I had done. In my pursuit of excitement and validation, I had destroyed the one constant in my life. The man who had loved me for over 3 decades now couldn't bear to look at me. I sat there alone in the wreckage of my marriage, the thrill of my affair turning to ashes in my mouth. The addiction that had seemed so irresistible now felt hollow and meaningless in the face of what I had lost. But it was too late. The damage was done, and there was no going back. I watched Aiden move through our house, methodically packing his belongings into suitcases and boxes. The weight of what I'd done pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. Every item he picked up seemed to carry a memory, a reminder of the life we'd built together over 3 decades. Aiden, please, I choked out, my voice barely above a whisper. Can't we talk about this? He didn't even look at me. His jaw was set, his movements mechanical. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the sound of zippers closing and drawers shutting. I followed him from room to room, desperately searching for words that could fix this, knowing deep down that nothing I said could undo what I'd done. The betrayal wasn't just the affair, it was the lies, the deception, the money I'd stolen from our savings. Our entire life together reduced to ashes because of my selfish desires. So as Aiden hefted the last of his bags, I couldn't hold back anymore. I'm sorry. I cried out, my voice cracking. I never meant for this to happen. Please don't go. He paused at the door, his hand on the knob. For a moment, I thought he might turn around, might give me one last chance. But when he spoke, his voice was cold and final. Goodbye, Emily. So the door closed behind him with a quiet click that seemed to echo through the now empty house. I collapsed to the floor, sobs racking my body, the weight of my actions crashed down on me all at once. I don't know how long I sat there, crying until I had no tears left. When I finally picked myself up, the house felt cavernous and alien. Every room held memories of our life together, now tainted by what I'd done. I wandered into our bedroom, my bedroom now, I supposed. Aiden's closet was half empty, his dresser drawers cleared out. On the nightstand, I saw the framed photo from our 25th anniversary. We looked so happy, so in love. How had I thrown all of that away? And the quiet was oppressive. I'd always hated when Aiden traveled for work, leaving me alone in the house. But this was different. This wasn't temporary. This was the new reality I'd created for myself. I found myself in the home office, staring at the computer screen where it had all started. That stupid forum, those messages with Jamal. If I could go back and undo it all, I would in a heartbeat, but there was no undoing this. My phone buzzed. For a split second, I hoped it might be Aiden, but no, it was Jamal. I felt bile rise in my throat as I deleted the message without reading it. The thought of him, of what I'd done, made me physically ill now. I opened our banking app, dreading what I'd see. The joint savings account that we'd built up over years of careful planning was drained. Saw that money, gone in a matter of weeks, spent on hotel rooms and gifts for Jamal and his friends. So the enormity of what I'd done hit me anew. As night fell, I found myself curled up on the couch, clutching one of Aiden's sweaters that he'd left behind. The house was so quiet, no TV playing in the background, no sounds of Aiden puttering around in his workshop, just silence and the echo of my own ragged breathing. I thought I was bored, restless in our marriage. Now I realized how much I'd taken for granted. The comfortable silences, the inside jokes, the way Aiden always knew when I needed a hug without me having to ask. All of it gone because I'd been too selfish, too caught up in my own desires to appreciate what I had. The thrill I'd felt during those clandestine meetings seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by a gnawing emptiness. I'd destroyed everything: my marriage, my financial security, my self respect, all for what? A few moments of excitement that now felt hollow and meaningless. As I lay there in the dark, the full weight of my isolation pressed down on me. I was truly alone now, in a way I'd never been before. And I had no one to blame but myself.